What if the street you used to live in never actually existed? Or you find yourself in a room that grants your darkest desires? Or maybe you get trapped in an infinite suburbia with no chance of escape. Hello everyone, and welcome to another video about depictions of cosmic horror. However, this time, instead of just going through more media, I am going to focus on stuff that fits a sub-theme. Places that shouldn't exist. All of these stories feature settings that don't fit the rules of our world, disobeying any reason or logic. Needless to say, you can expect spoilers, and with that being said, let's get started. Stalker is a masterpiece by Andrei Tarkovsky that deals with various philosophical matters and questions. But for the purposes of this video, I will focus on the Zone, a mysterious area where most of the movie takes place. The Zone has its own rules, which are very much different from our own reality. Its origin is unclear, but one theory suggested is that a meteor crashed from space and created it as a side effect. This is a familiar concept to cosmic horror. For example, in Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space, a very similar thing happens. A meteor crashes on a farm, and as a result, everything turns gray, the plants change, the livestock are altered, and the residents go insane, naturally. Similarly, the Zone is a place where logic breaks down. It has been closed off by the authorities, surrounded by various myths and fears. Despite this, it draws people in with the promise of the Room, a place inside the Zone where one's deepest desires are said to be fulfilled. The plot follows three men, a writer, a professor, and a stalker, as they navigate the treacherous environment. The Stalker is like a tour guide, having developed an almost spiritual connection to the Zone's unpredictable dangers. The landscape is alien in ways that are subtle but strange. Flowers bloom without any scent. Ruins and decaying military equipment are scattered as though arranged by some unseen force. Even simple actions like walking in a straight line become scary, as the ground itself might shift or deceive those who fail to respect it. Moving safely requires rituals, like tossing bolts tied with cloth to test for invisible traps. And this place is very similar to the Shimmer from Annihilation, which I mentioned in my first video, but I have to say Stalker does this concept a lot more elegantly, leaning into how the Zone affects the human psyche, and every little thing that happens here feels like a big deal, because most of the movie is pretty slow. Eventually, the three men encounter a location known as the Meat Grinder, which seems to demand a sacrifice before allowing passage. Here we see the Zone exerting a strange moral pressure, forcing the travelers to confront the darker parts of themselves. And this whole thing is not simply a physical journey, but also a spiritual one. The three men are faced with many questions about themselves and life in general. I interpreted this as the Zone influencing their minds, causing these topics to surface from their subconscious. Ultimately, they reach the Room, and it is revealed to be a mirror to the soul, fulfilling not the conscious wishes, but those deeper, hidden ones. The Zone and the room within it expose what lies beneath human ambition, fear, and guilt, doing so without judgment. Tarkovsky never fully explains the Zone, and that's why it's so special. It exists as a force beyond reason, a mirror, a test, or perhaps even a living entity we can't comprehend. Vivarium is a surreal horror film directed by Lorcan Finnegan that traps its characters in a place that seems perfectly normal at first glance. But the more you look at it, the more wrong it becomes. The story follows a young couple who are led by a real estate agent to a new suburban development called Yonder. And this place is a depressing suburbia. Endless rows of identical, artificial looking houses stretching out to infinity. The couple tries to leave, but quickly they realize that this would be impossible. Once they've entered, no matter how far they drive or which road they take, they always end up back at house number 9. The passage of time here is unnatural, and the atmosphere feels sterile. The clouds are all perfectly cloud-shaped, the lighting is always the same, like this is some extreme version of the Truman Show. They're delivered a baby in a box, and they're supposed to raise him. And this guy might just be the most annoying kid in any movie. He's constantly screaming and mocking them. And he's actually not even really a boy, he's some kind of mutant alien thing. He grows super fast, he can imitate sounds perfectly and moves really weird sometimes. It's all very unsettling. The movie makes it very clear that he's something very different from us. He watches this incomprehensible TV channel and reads a similar looking book. The purpose of this place turns out to be a nursery for the boy. The role of the couple was to raise him. And who knows what this thing actually is. It's kind of a cool thought that it might be some cosmic entity offspring that can only be raised by humans for some reason. So the entities created this neighborhood that they thought humans would find idealistic in order for them to do the job. Any attempts to resist are useless, which is cool because in many movies people manage to escape. But from the very start, it's clear that that will not be happening here. At one point, when the kid is running away, he folds up the pavement like it was Play-Doh, once again showing that this place isn't real. And here we get to see the real deal. The stuff behind the pretty facade. It's a bunch of illogical rooms, like this is where whatever creatures designed this place tucked away all the non-Euclidean gears that run the place. The mom then falls through other versions of couples, all raising the boy in misery. But I wonder why they couldn't just be neighbors. Maybe this place was designed so that each couple exists in its own pocket dimension. Like the creators are so advanced that they didn't understand the concept of neighbors, which is pretty funny to think about. This movie is pretty unique, and it does a great job at showing that horror of everyday life. Get a copy-pasted house, never see your neighbors, have a kid, and die. No fun or unique experiences, just a mundane existence. Maybe the one thing scarier than cosmic horror. Dark City by Alex Proyas takes place somewhere that is pretty much the exact opposite of Vivarium. It's like a retro vision of cyberpunk, but without the advanced technology, which I am quite a fan of. There's no sunlight, no morning, no beginning or end, just a constant heavy midnight. The buildings stretch unnaturally high, the streets loop back on themselves, and no one seems to notice how wrong it all is. They just go about their lives like they've always been here, but they haven't. Every night at midnight, the entire city changes. The alien overlords, these pale, hive-minded beings, rearrange the architecture as easily as we write code. They rewrite people's entire lives and implant new memories. One day you're a detective, the next you're a fry cook with a wife you didn't have yesterday. And somehow no one notices. What we come to find is that memory isn't what makes a person. You can change someone's past all you want, but something deeper, some inner essence, remains and bleeds through. That's what the strangers are trying to figure out. They've put humans in this enormous zoo of a city to study what makes us us. They're dying out, and they believe the answer lies in understanding the soul. And yes, they're clearly more advanced than we are. They can reshape reality with a thought, bend buildings like rubber, and stop time. But they're not gods, because the protagonist, an ordinary man who wakes up in the middle of a memory transplant, learns to tune just like they do, which means there's still something in humanity that even they can't fully understand or control. So let's say if Cthulhu is 6 dimensions ahead of us, these guys are maybe just 1 or 2 steps up the ladder. The Willows by Algernon Blackwood might just be my favorite depiction of this sub-theme of cosmic horror of places that shouldn't exist. So far, I had really only read Lovecraft in terms of cosmic horror, but this guy really nailed it, and I'm definitely going to check out some more stuff from him in the future. So in this story, the narrator and his friend, the Swede, are traveling down a mysterious river filled with willow trees. So they're moving by canoe, and they park it and set up camp. And as soon as they finish cooking and setting stuff up, basically as soon as their minds take a break, they start feeling strange, but they can't quite put a finger on it. The narrator says how forests, mountains, and nature in general invoke strange feelings in us, but they're usually pleasant and comprehensible. This is not the case for this location. So, naturally, some strange events start happening. They both see an otter floating in the water, and interestingly enough, they think it's a body. Then a strange man goes by in another canoe, waving and yelling something at them, but they can't understand him. The Swede, for some strange reason, jokes that the man probably thought they were spirits. You remember the shopwoman at Pressburg warning us that no one ever landed here because it belonged to some sort of beings outside man's world. The fear doesn't leave, it stays in the back of their heads. They don't feel comfortable sleeping or even talking. They feel like they're being listened to, observed by something that isn't visible. It was like talking out loud in church, or in some place where it was not lawful, perhaps not quite safe, to be overheard. The narrator truly starts feeling that the Willows are alive, that they're speaking to each other and conspiring against the two of them. So they go to sleep. But of course, something wakes up the narrator. He feels like the tent is closing in, so he exits, and in the distance, he sees something peculiar. The willows are swaying with the wind, but there's something wrong. He sees that the wind isn't necessarily matching with the shapes the willows are taking. These are huge shapes that look like monsters, moving like they have a mind of their own. And there's this great line: I searched everywhere for a proof of reality, when all the while I understood quite well that the standard of reality had changed. A gust of wind, however, knocks him down, and he starts to rationalize again, thinking that, oh, it's maybe just in his head or something. When he wakes up fully, however, he notes that the willows are closer than they were the night before. They actually moved towards them. They discover that the canoe is broken and one paddle is missing. The paddle that's still there is damaged in an elegant way that no human could have done. As they're fixing the boat, the Swede keeps raising his hand to his ear, listening to the willows as if they're talking to him. Later, they hear a humming sound coming from the willows, like a gong, they describe it. But it doesn't reach them through the ears, it reaches them with some other form that they can't explain. It feels like it's inside them. They say it's like some fourth dimensional experience. The Swede then says, "You think," he said, "it is the spirit of the elements, and I thought perhaps it was the old gods. But I tell you now it is neither. These would be comprehensible entities, for they have relations with men, depending upon them for worship or sacrifice, whereas these beings who are now about us have absolutely nothing to do with mankind, and it is mere chance that their space happens just at this spot to touch our own. So they agree not to talk or even think about what's going on here, because the things might detect them if they do. Sand funnels start appearing around them, some as big as a leg and a foot, they say. They go to sleep again, and when the narrator wakes up, the Swede is missing. He searches and finds him trying to enter the water. Of course, he saves him, but they see something next to them. It is the body of a peasant. The Swede explains that the Willows found another victim, and that the two of them are going to be spared after all. I really like this story because it does a great job of putting the stuff to words. Some of those quotes I read really nail cosmic horror in my opinion, and they gave me some new perspective on the subject. The setting is amazing. Creepy dark willows twisting into shapes and shadows that aren't logical, and them coming closer is just terrifying to think about. I'm not too sure on what the otter was about. Maybe the two men just got their human senses overwhelmed and couldn't process what the willows or whatever is behind them was actually happening. The music of Erich Zann by Lovecraft is pretty short when compared to some of his other stories, but despite this, it builds a really good spooky atmosphere, especially when it comes to the setting. The narrator is recalling his days as a college student, when he lived in a street called Rue d'Orsay, which he can no longer find. In fact, he can't even find anyone who's heard of this place, let alone lived there or been there. The street is described as gloomy and strange. It's so narrow that it's almost a cliff. There's an evil stench of a nearby river, and it's filled with illogical streets that end abruptly in front of walls of ivy. And interestingly enough, everybody there is old. From the very start, it's clear that this place is either some corrupted memory or maybe an offshoot from a dream of one of Lovecraft's cosmic entities. The room where the narrator stayed was on the 5th floor of the tallest building, and from there, at nighttime, he could hear the strange music of Erich Zann. Knowing little of the art myself, I was yet certain that none of his harmonies had any relation to music I had heard before. So after a week of listening to the music at nighttime, he finally approaches Erich and asks if he could play something for him. This guy isn't too thrilled about the request, but eventually he caves in and lets the guy in. So the two of them chill out for about an hour, and Erich plays the music. But the narrator says how this is nothing like the music he hears at night. The narrator says this, and he starts to whistle some of the tunes he overheard before. And right as he does this, Erich goes completely insane. His face goes beyond analysis, and he covers the narrator's mouth in order to stop his imitation. Then something quite strange happens. Erich glances at the window, as if something was going to hear the whistling imitation or maybe even come in to the apartment. This doesn't make any logical sense because they're above the 5th floor. Erich lives in the attic. The narrator comes close to the window to see what's going on, but Erich pulls him away and makes him leave. The next time they meet, Erich starts writing an extensive note, presumably an explanation of the music and whatever is going on in this place, which is when a sound comes from the outside, and it's described as a low and infinitely distant musical note. The narrator doesn't think too much of this new noise, but Erich goes insane. He grabs his viol and starts intensely playing, even more so than the previous nights. In contrast to Erich's crazy tunes, the ones coming from the window are calm and deliberate. A gust of wind comes and takes the notes and explanations that Erich was writing down. The narrator goes to the window to catch them from leaving, but it's too late. Now, the narrator is finally seeing through the window for the first time. And instead of seeing the city sprawled out in front of him like he would expect from the attic window, he sees the blackness of space illimitable, unimagined space alive with motion and music, and having no semblance to anything on Earth. The guy trips, falls over a table, breaks a chair, feels something touch him, and starts screaming. It's clear that he went absolutely insane after coming in contact with the outer world. This whole time, Erich is playing the viol and making it do sounds that viols shouldn't make. The narrator tries to shake him in order to get him out of this trance state, but Erich doesn't budge. This is when he touches Erich's face, and it's cold. It turns out Erich is dead, and despite being dead, he's still playing the viol somehow. After touching his face, the narrator gets even more scared and he runs out. That is pretty much the story. So, what exactly happened here? It's clear that Erich was trying to keep something at bay, whatever made those calm and deliberate sounds. How Erich came into contact with this thing, we'll never know. Just like we'll never know why it was his duty in particular to keep this thing from entering. It actually reminds me of the woodsman from Over the Garden Wall, and how he has to keep the lamp lit, which turned out to be something of a futile task, which could very well be the case for Erich as well. Maybe if the thing wanted to come in, it would have at any moment, despite Erich's incomprehensible tunes. However, what intrigued me the most with this story, and actually gave me the idea for this video, was the setting. From the start, we remembered that this is an illogical place. It shouldn't exist. In fact, it doesn't exist at the time the narrator is telling the story. He can't find it on any maps, nor can he find anyone who knows about it. And the fact that everybody here is old is such a small but strangely unsettling detail, except the narrator. He was here in his college days. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning since we're here is the parallel between this story and musicians the likes of Tartini, Paganini, or even Robert Johnston, all rumored to have made deals with the devil in exchange for musical skill and fame. Tartini's Devil Trill Sonata even supposedly came from his dream, where the devil showed him the music, and he himself said that his rendition is only a poor man's imitation of what he heard in the dream. Then Paganini's stage performance is said to have been wild, like he was possessed, much like Erich at the end of the story. Maybe this is what happened to Erich as well. He made some unfortunate deal with a cosmic entity, and he was stuck in a place that shouldn't exist. How the narrator got here, however, we'll never know. Thank you very much for watching.